The glossy reflection of the high-rise café vanished, replaced by the faded brick of Maple Street. Here, the air was thick with the smell of exhaust and old possibility. The humiliation from the day before felt distant, overshadowed by the very real crisis unfolding on every doorstep. Eviction notices, stark white papers stamped with the Thorne Acquisitions logo, were taped to the community center's front window, like bandages over a fatal wound. Before we jump into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next one. Alara found Marcus, the center's longtime custodian, and a fixture in the neighborhood, sweeping the steps with a rhythm that felt more like defiance than maintenance. He pointed silently to a small group of senior citizens gathered around a broken bench, confusion etched on their faces. They weren't just losing their homes, they were losing their safety net, their history. Alara knew the fight wasn't on Maple Street anymore. It was downtown. She changed into her only professional attire, a slightly too tight blazer, and took 3 different buses to the glass fortress that housed Thorne Acquisitions. The building was an ice sculpture of wealth. Inside, the security guards, with their indifferent eyes, asked her to wait in a waiting area designed to intimidate. She wasn't there to see Victor Thorne. She was there to appeal to his corporate machine. When she finally met with a junior executive named Jordan, the encounter confirmed her deepest fears about systemic classism. Jordan, slick and polished, didn't see Alara. He saw a logistical problem. "Ms. Sanchez, we appreciate your passion," Jordan said, leaning back in a chair that cost more than Alara's annual salary. "But the Maple Street property is zoned for luxury residential. The paperwork is finalized. Community centers can be relocated. It's simple optimization." Alara's voice, usually strong and steady when she spoke for her neighborhood, cracked with the effort to be heard. "It's not optimization, it's erasure. This building holds a food pantry for 100 families. It tutors kids who can't afford after-school help. It's where Mrs. Patel learned English after coming here 50 years ago. You call that logistical noise? That's human life." Jordan merely tapped his pen on a file marked Maple Saint Acquisition. His lack of emotion was more chilling than any direct cruelty. "The market dictates the need, Miss Sanchez, and the market has spoken." He dismissed her pleas with the calm finality of a judge passing sentence. Her raw, genuine pain was nothing but a faulty signal in his high-powered corporate echo chamber. Walking out onto the pavement, the city felt vast and uncaring. The humiliation of the café, the accidental insult to Victor Thorne, now felt tragically symbolic. It wasn't just his arrogance she faced. It was the hopeless disadvantage of trying to shout down an entire system designed to ignore her. She hadn't just insulted a man. She had insulted the power that defined her struggle. But as she watched a group of kids from her center play basketball in the fading light, their laughter felt like a small, stubborn flame. The system had spoken, but the dignity of Maple Street had yet to cast its vote. The fight for Maple Street had entered a phase of desperate late nights. Alara, guided by a disgruntled former Thorne employee named Rebecca, found herself far from the bus routes, navigating the deep web of property records and corporate shell companies. She wasn't looking for a loophole anymore. She was hunting for a crime. The air in the small borrowed office was thin with fatigue when the truth finally surfaced. It wasn't Victor Thorne's signature on the most aggressive and legally dubious eviction paperwork. It was Edward Hayes, Thorne Acquisitions' long-serving and outwardly impeccable vice president. A few more hours of digging and clicking revealed the full scope. Hayes was not only accelerating the demolitions, but also manipulating property appraisals and using discriminatory lending practices, racist housing policies, cloaked in corporate jargon, to systematically push out the neighborhood's non-white and lower-income families. Before Victor Thorne could intervene, Hayes was using Thorne's reputation as a shield for his own profit and prejudice. Alara held a digital ledger that proved the entire Maple Street acquisition was built on fraud and bigotry, not just pure business ambition. This was the turning point. Alara had always pictured Victor Thorne as the singular villain. Now she realized the true enemy was closer to home. Not hers, but his. She had insulted a powerful, arrogant man, but the injustice destroying her life was being orchestrated by a hidden hand. The decision was agonizing. The evidence was strong enough to go to the press, but that would mean a slow, messy legal fight her community couldn't afford. The only way to stop the demolition before the deadline was to go directly to Victor Thorne, the very man whose cold eyes still haunted her memory from the café. It was an act of faith, a desperate gamble that the man she had called arrogant might possess the one thing Edward Hayes lacked, a core of integrity. She waited outside Thorne's private gym downtown, refusing to use his office, determined to meet him on neutral ground. When he finally appeared, clean and imposing in his workout gear, his face was unreadable. "Miss Sanchez," he stated, his voice cool, acknowledging the woman who had publicly slighted him. Alara stepped forward, ignoring the years of class difference, ignoring her shaking hands. She looked him straight in the eye, not pleading, but demanding justice. "Mr. Thorne, you don't know what your VP is doing. It's not about property value. It's about racism and fraud. This is proof." She held out a simple, unmarked USB drive. He looked down at the drive, then back at her, his expression finally shifting from cold assessment to something far more complex. A flicker of doubt, perhaps even dawning realization. He took the drive, the weight of the accusation settling heavy between them. The class war was momentarily suspended. Now, they were simply two people facing a common, deeply ugly truth. The public hearing room was a claustrophobic stage for the entire city's tension. Every seat was taken. The press huddled near the front, and the entire Maple Street community sat shoulder to shoulder, their faces tight with fear and hope. This room, sterile and official, felt like the ultimate courtroom for their dignity. Alara sat in the second row, clutching a worn photograph of the community center's first day. The air was heavy, reminiscent of the dreadful silence in the cafe. But this time, the entire world was watching. On the platform, Edward Hayes, Thorne's corrupt vice president, radiated false confidence as he prepared to deliver his final, damning report against Maple Street. Then the doors opened. Victor Thorne walked in. He didn't take the empty chair next to Hayes. He walked straight to the microphone stand, his appearance an unexpected shock that silenced the room completely. Hayes looked utterly bewildered. Thorne took a deep breath, the sound amplified throughout the room. "I am withdrawing the acquisition proposal for Maple Street. Effective immediately," Victor stated, his voice ringing with a weight that cut through years of arrogance. A wave of confused whispers swept through the room, but Thorne raised his hand, commanding silence. He didn't mention Alara. He didn't mention the cafe. He spoke only of the truth. "The due diligence I received on this project was not only incomplete, it was willfully fraudulent. It relied on internal, discriminatory practices to force out residents based on racial and economic bias." He looked directly at Edward Hayes, who was now sweating profusely. Visual, extreme close-up of Hayes's face turning pale. "Mr. Hayes has been terminated. The evidence, which includes fraudulent property valuations and explicit collusion with local officials, has been turned over to the district attorney's office." The moment of corporate reckoning was stunning. The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in a wave of gasps, followed by a sudden, powerful silence. The humiliation Alara had suffered was now dwarfed by the public exposure of Hayes's deep-seated corruption. Justice was served not with a dramatic fight, but with the quiet, authoritative power of truth. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Later that evening, Alara stood outside the Maple Street Community Center. The eviction notices were gone, scraped off the brick. Victor Thorne, standing awkwardly near the steps, had waited for her. "The land is being placed into a trust," Thorne said quietly, his hands deep in his pockets. "For the center, my way of correcting what I missed." He paused, looking at her, a genuine acknowledgement replacing the cold dismissal from the cafe. Alara finally spoke, her tone neither triumphant nor forgiving, but simply human. "It wasn't about the money, Mr. Thorne. It was about seeing us, about respecting our humanity." Thorne nodded, not meeting her eyes, but understanding. He had seen the truth through her courage, realizing that his own wealth had shielded him from his own company's injustice. He had faced his own reflection and found it wanting. The real power, he realized, wasn't the signature on a demolition order, but the resilience of a woman fighting for her neighbors. And so, the quiet power of dignity, once whispered in a moment of humiliation, became the greatest force required to change the world.